I respect both Tiago and Nick for the work they've done and that they're continuously doing when it comes to managing information online. But I have a different philosophical approach, so some of the foundations of the way that we would explain experiences and learning from experiences is different. And I do recognize that packaging videos and stuff can be difficult when it comes to terminology and things like that, but the title irritated me, and I don't quite see why someone from Evernote would go to Obsidian from what's said in the video. From my understanding, taking Tiago's course, reading the book, speaking with Nick, and speaking with Tiago, I understand the second brain as a system, not an app. So it could be a collection of apps or a systematic approach to managing information, whether it be capturing, storing, organizing. They could be in different places. So when I see moving second brain, I'm like, yeah, but are you moving your second brain or are you just moving a part of? And yeah, I know that sounds nitpicky, but it makes it sound like the entirety of the second brain is in Evernote and going to Obsidian, which I don't think is accurate. And the main reason I want to say that is because the stuff that's said in the video moving from Evernote to Obsidian, it's beginner, that's what's used, it's starting with Obsidian. All of the things that are done, features-wise, can be done in Evernote, so why would you move from Evernote to Obsidian when everything shown in the video can be done in either app? And I believe, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but both Tiago and Nick support this idea of using whatever tool suits you. So the marketing just doesn't seem to match the way that I experience the information that they share online in conversations backwards and forwards on different platforms. But going beyond the packaging nitpicking, we get to the map of content concept. From my understanding, the map of content is a concept that can be applied to any app, not just Obsidian. And when I look at map of content, I don't personally understand the label or term, because to me, it's a file or a note or a page, whatever terminology you want to use for the app you're using, that has links in it. But every app can do that, and most files that you're doing something in, apart from just writing, will have a link. To be a bit more specific there, links to other notes of yours. And this is where I've always got lost. What is and what isn't a map of content? If I have a file that has one link in, is that a map of content? Do I need 3 links? Do I need 5 links? Or if there's no links, does that mean it's not a map of content, even though there's loads of writing in there? Like, I don't know what or where the line is to say this is a map of content or this isn't a map of content, and it seems somewhat flexible, which isn't a bad thing. But this is where the philosophical approaches differ. I come from an ecological approach rather than from traditional approaches. So when I'm explaining experiences, I'm not looking at labeled nouns and things. I'm looking at, okay, is it searchable? Is it usable? Is it readable? I'm looking at things within action. So I'm looking for verbs or verbing the nouns. And where this is important to me is when I have a project. Is a project a map of content? Or does a project use a map of content? Or are all projects maps of content that are used, but a project is another label that we put on the same file? Or are source notes put together in a file, the map of content, and then you use that for the project? You see where, like, the labels get complicated and you start trying to work out and categorizing different files. So the way I approach my projects is asking, is this file, page, project readable? Can I read down the file and understand the way that I was thinking when I was writing that file? Because our thinking is evolving and ever-changing, because it's obviously dynamic, the way that we act in the world. To give you a practical example, you can see here, this is readable. I've got sources, list, and it goes down into me what is a logical way, because it's readable to me. It's an affordance to me. For you, it may look completely different, and that was obviously shown in the video with Tiago and Nick. They organize their headers differently. But here I have links. Does that mean this is a map of content because it links to other external links, but also internal links here? I don't know. And something else that somewhat confuses me is when Nick says that if it's a 700-word article from the heart, you don't need research. Well, I would argue there is research because you've experienced something. So there's information there. There's your own research. It's just research you haven't put into the file, which is, to me, an important distinction, because that means the file category changes on what's in it or what's not in it, not what represents the actual experience. So the experience of sharing your information, sharing knowledge, sharing whatever it is, or writing whatever it is, that experience that is ongoing and active is somewhat put behind the how do I categorize or label this thing, which obviously is different for everyone and changes throughout time, which means each file has the potential to be a project, which I think Nick and Tiago both would agree with, whether you're merging information together, whether that's words or sections or entire files, or the file grows and becomes a project. But that relies on labels. And when you label different files, whether it's a map of content, a project file, a video file, a source file, whatever label you've put on it, those labels can change over time. And from the ecological approach, we believe we perceive directly. So this indirect information, the project label, the evergreen note label, the map of content label, we need prior information to be able to say, okay, that's this and that's that. But who gives you that prior information? That's the loan of intelligence, which comes from the philosophy. And who gives you that information? Well, it needs to be a guru or an expert or someone else that tells you that is what this word means. Whereas if, from an ecological approach, we directly perceive the information, we would look and say, that's readable to me, or that's not readable to me. So instead of adding labels to files, look at what is directly available in that relationship between you and the file. And I could already hear the comments, but you need to organize your files. And to that, I would say, well, they are already organized, just not self-organized by you. You haven't self-organized them in the relationship of the experience you're working with right now. So when I'm working on a file or a project or the entire vault, that is an experience that I'm working through, that I'm learning in, and the organization will be different because I, with the environment that I'm working in, in this case specifically Obsidian, I'm going to self-organize that environment to help me get to where I want to go. So when I'm writing a project, I will maybe organize all of the source files in a folder, or maybe in a search, or maybe categories or properties. I will self-organize them in a different way depending on my goal. So instead of looking at organization as a thing that you've done, like I am now organized, it's ongoing. It's self-organization as dynamic systems, which I believe we are, again, coming from the ecological approach. So when I look at the ideas around atomic notes and evergreen notes, well, they're individual files, which adds complexity to the system because there are more elements, there are more parts to the system, which can mean that it requires more energy to maintain everything because self-organizing things requires energy. And if you've got lots of different parts, which is what evergreen notes and atomic notes typically do, because you then have thousands of files, it requires more energy, more work. If you want and have the time to put more work and energy and effort into organizing all of that information, go for it. I personally don't want to spend loads of time trying to find and sift through thousands of potentially connected notes for a project. I would much rather have them organized in the file that I'm working in, which is why I have big 17,000+ word files rather than 1,000 word files. But of course, we are all different organisms with different self-organization throughout varying dynamic environments throughout time. So everyone is going to have a different way to do it, and that's going to change throughout time. So there's no right or wrong. But to me, adding the labels and suggesting instructions adds complexity into the way that we organize information. Why not just keep it simple to me and use direct cues such as readable, usable, those sorts of things, which are affordances. And yes, of course, we can create our own labels and categories which have meaning to us, and I've done it in the past. I've tried following other people's advice and guidelines, but I always end up changing the label, and it becomes an added element to organizing information, being able to attach a label or a category or working out how to separate these different files instead of just working in the information through experience and then saying, okay, is this usable right now? Can I work with this right now? Yes or no? And then doing whatever it is that I need to do with the file at the time in the experience of me working with it, rather than spending loads of upfront work organizing stuff to say I'm organized, then starting and realize, damn, I need to reorganize again. And that conversation did not go in the direction I was expecting it to, but yeah, there's some thoughts.